18 and 19, and today we get to continue to see the ups and downs of the kingship of Judah. But before we get into that, I want to remind you the families that we're going to be praying for. Today we're praying for the Terry family, for Eric, Cynthia, and Chance. And tomorrow on Saturday, we're going to be praying for Bill and Irene Wade and Becky. So let's remember to take some time to be in prayer for those families today. These two chapters head into the story, 18 and 19, that's probably for a long time been one of my favorite stories out of the Old Testament, specifically in the next chapter, the one that we're reading tomorrow, where Hezekiah, being confronted by the king of Assyria and feeling pretty threatened and feeling like there was no hope, he runs into the temple and he puts that letter out for the Lord, and basically like saying, Lord, look at what this king is saying. Look what's going to happen. And please to the Lord. And the Lord comes through, of course, and we see this great salvation. Just absolutely one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. But today, we get to see the introduction of this king. The Bible describes him as sort of one of a kind. No king like him after or before, in the terms of him loving the Lord and wanting to live in obedience. I mean, this guy was completely sold out for God. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to stand in the way of the nation returning to God in his eyes. And we see that. He's not just a man who loves God, he's also a man who is of action. I mean, right away, he is tearing down temples that are built to idols, removing the high places, which we've seen a lot of kings refuse to do. For whatever reason, they refuse to get rid of those high places. Hezekiah doesn't hesitate. And I think one of the things that stands out to me the most is that he gets rid of this bronze serpent that was made by Moses. Where did this thing come from? Well, you may remember the story of Israel being led through the wilderness by Moses. One of their favorite things to do was to complain against Moses. Why did you bring us out here? Why did you take us away from Egypt? At least we had food there. Now we're out here and we got to eat this horrible manna that God is providing for us. Just real hateful stuff. In this particular story, God judges them for it with snakes. You may end up getting poisoned. But God also provides a way for them to be healed. And it's through this bronze snake that he instructs Moses to make. The surprising thing about this chapter to me is, first of all, that they still have this thing. I mean, I understand that it was an important part of their history. But it seems that it's gotten to this time where either the history has been corrupted or they've just put way too much emphasis on this thing because they are sacrificing to it or worshiping it in a sort of a way. And Hezekiah sees this and knows that it's no good. It's not pleasing to God, and that's not what the bronze snake was for anyways. Yeah, it was an important part of their history. And I think that if it was me, that probably would have given me pause. I mean, Moses made this thing. If I'm Hezekiah, I would have looked and said, maybe I shouldn't get rid of this thing. I mean, it's pretty important. But like I said, Hezekiah wasn't going to let anything stand in the way between the nation returning to the Lord and doing what pleases him. There was nothing too sacred to get rid of that was going to stand in the way of God. God is the only sacred thing to Hezekiah. And so he even gets rid of this snake. And that really just stands out to me about this chapter. We can relate to this, especially as people who have been in church for a long time. We probably know that there's things that churches count as sacred that sometimes they put a little bit too much emphasis on because that's the way it's always been. Things that are maybe more important to them and maybe more important to us than God is. These things can certainly become idols and can certainly become corrupted, even though they were originally something that was good and something that was from the Lord. They've taken the Lord's place in our heart. There's this phrase that is used, I've heard before in churches, where we say there's no sacred cows or whatever. There's nothing that we do in this church or no certain thing that is going to be more important than God, that we won't get rid of if God tells us to. I think that's what we see here with King Hezekiah. I mean, the people were looking at this in the wrong way. It had taken the wrong place in their heart, and he got rid of it because the most important thing for him was returning to the Lord. And I think that's a good question for us to ask. What considerations do we have in our heart when we think about obeying God and returning to Him? There should really be only one consideration: running to Him as quickly as possible, getting everything else out of the way that might be taking that place in our heart. I want to pray for you today that God will speak to you as you're reading this passage, as you're thinking and meditating on Him. He'll speak to you about returning to Him, about trusting in Him, no matter what you're facing today, knowing that He's your only Savior. He is all that we need. All right. God bless you guys.